local history, local culture, local events, your community. This is the Joe Kelly Show.
Hi there, everybody. Welcome to the show. We're at number 3 Rutger Park. We've talked a lot about it on the show, but this is the first time we've been here. We're going to give you a tour of what really is probably one of the most historic, iconic places in the city of Utica. Our guest is Mike Bosak. Mike is a member of Landmark Society of Greater Utica, has been for many years, one of the driving forces at Landmark, and we're going to talk to him about all that. But before we do, we're going to say thanks for having us in, Mike.
Our pleasure, Joe.
Yeah, what a house. Number 3 Rutger. I don't think I was overstating it when I say it's probably the most iconic address in the city of Utica.
Well, I think you definitely nailed it because it is. It is a National Historic Landmark. It is one of the oldest houses still in existence in Utica, and the people that have lived here, the people that have visited here and all, it's just endless.
Let's start at the beginning. This house was built in
1830 is when it opened, but actually it was started in 1820. At the time, Judge Morris Miller had bought some property and envisioned a house here at the very head of John Street, and it was all farmland, or basically undeveloped land, and he had a vision. And unfortunately, he passed before this house was built. It was completed by his wife, his widow, and his son, Rutger Bleecker Miller, and was opened in 1830. They had hired an Albany architect of quite a bit of fame, Philip Hooker, who designed many important buildings, and this is the end result.
Well, Philip Hooker, did he do something else in Utica? I should know this.
Not in Utica necessarily, but he was involved with the staircase at the Capitol in Albany.
Mm-hmm. The $1 million staircase.
Hamilton, yes.
Yeah.
Hamilton College, the chapel there. He had some involvement on the facade, and some other places.
That's what I was thinking of, Hamilton College, because we were just up there, did a show in the chapel up there, and that's where I'm glad you mentioned this building being at the top of John Street, because when you come up John Street, and back in the day, and you come up and here's this beautiful house sitting at the top of the hill. Magnificent.
It was almost a folly back then because it was so far removed from downtown, which is basically Bagg Square. So there was a little bit of kidding going around, of course, that this was in the middle of nowhere, but of course they knew that the city would grow in this direction.
Yeah. Now, this sits in what they call historic Rutger Park.
Yes. Originally it was called Rutger Place, and I'm not sure exactly when they changed it to Rutger Park.
Mm-hmm. But on the end, that would be the west end of Rutger Park. You've got what used to be the old Dowling nursing home, but it was, what was the name of the mansion?
They call it the Munn Castle because that was built several years later in 1854. And John Munn and his bride, who was a Southern belle, basically had that house built, and they only stayed there for a year. She probably got a little tired of the Utica winters.
Yeah. And then next to it was number 2. That came down, right?
That came down in 1994, unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, and then number 3 here. Number 4 is, what I remember as a boy growing up in this neighborhood, actually, was the Swancott home.
Yes.
For
most
unwed
people, I think,
mothers.
would remember it as that.
Yeah. And what is it today?
It's not used for anything. It's owned by a couple of entrepreneurs from Massachusetts and all that bought it several years ago. So.
And then next to that would be what, when I was a kid, was the Teamster building.
Yes, number 5. And now it's privately owned by a family that lives there, and they're very nice people.
Number 3 is the centerpiece of all this. After the judge passed and after his widow passed, how did it change hands next?
Basically around 1850, it was sold and they divided up the parcels because this was all one parcel at the time. After that, they divided it up, and hence number 2 was built in 1854, number 1 was built in 1854 as well. So, and then the other ones several years later.
The building is owned outright by Landmark Society?
Yes, number 1 number 3, and the land in the middle where number 2 sat is all owned free and clear by Landmarks.
And the reason Landmarks got into this ownership was what, Mike?
Well, the buildings were for sale, and there was a very real concern that these would be, either turned into apartments or, I mean, at the time, there might have been frat houses or something like that down the road. Rutger Park had some frat houses that were associated with, I think, with Utica College and all that. So we wanted to make sure that it was preserved and recognized for what it is. I mean, again, we're talking about very prominent buildings in Utica. This is a National Historic Landmark, as I said before. So we really needed to really give this place its just due. And it was a quantum leap for Landmarks because we had never owned property before. We managed to secure the financing and did purchase it. So the rest is pretty much history. We've been slowly restoring. We still have a long way to go, a lot of work to do, but we have to work on our vision, on what we do with it, and we have some ideas, so we move forward.
We'll talk about that vision in a few minutes. So next door, you own that, it's vacant today.
Yes.
You own that?
Yes.
Okay, so you own 1 through 3?
Yes.
Okay. Do you mind if I ask what that cost?
It was about $350,000.
And were you able to get any grants or things like that?
Not grants per se, but some low interest loans and all that, which we have paid back.
And you're using this property today. I mean, you use it for events.
Yes, we do, because it's an asset, so we use it for events. We've had some very good ones here. We've had Party in the Park here. We've had actually some ghost seeker events and all that. A lot of different parties and all. So it's a very good place for that. Again, we need work. We need to do some work.
Do you do weddings here as well?
We've done a few.
Yeah.
We've done a few, and we'd like to do more. But again, we need to do some work before we can actually get that going.
Yeah. You know what somebody told me a long time ago, and they were talking about preserving things. They said the best way to preserve something is to get people in it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've said this all along. We are very much advocates for reusing buildings and saving buildings, but they need a reuse. They need a purpose.
And a good example of that, we're going to go to break here in a second, but a good example of that is Union Station.
Yes.
You got people in there now and the building is going well.
Very well.
When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the rooms here and some of the history in these rooms and some of the people that were in this building. Short break, right back. And welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. We're at number 3, Rutger Park. We're talking with Mike Bosak. Mike is one of the members of Landmarks Society of Greater Utica. Landmarks owns this building, saved this building, and we're going to give you a look around this building. We are in the dining room.
Yes, we are.
And you drew my attention to the wallpaper in this dining room, Mike.
Yes, the wallpaper here is very historic, iconic. It is called Zuber Wallpaper, which is a French company that was started, I believe, in 1790s, and I think it's still in existence today. Last I knew, they did have an office in New York City, but I'm thinking that this wallpaper appeared in this room somewhere between 1894 and 1929, when the Kernan family owned it, bought it from Julia Conkling, Roscoe Conkling's widow. And basically they did a renovation, and I believe they expanded this room, made it quite a bit larger, and the Zuber wallpaper was put in. It's hand-blocked wallpaper, so it's one of a kind basically, and I'm told that the blocks that this particular pattern, which is called the tropical zones, These particular blocks were used for firewood during World War II by the Nazis. So it's impossible to recreate it using the original blocks. This would be restored. At some point, we'd love to do that, have it restored to its original grandeur.
The woodwork in this building is phenomenal,
It
isn't
is phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah. And it's all original to the building?
Pretty much, yes. Yes. I mean, again, there were several renovations over time between the 1830s and the 1950s and all that. So, but original for the most part, yes.
The library, which is next door to us, great room. You've got a lot of pictures in there, a lot of paintings in there, including some of the occupants of this building.
Yes, we have two portraits of Julia Conkling in there, and of course she was Julia Seymour Conkling, Horatio Seymour's sister, married Roscoe Conkling, and this was really her homestead. I mean, we call it the Roscoe Conkling house, but he didn't spend a lot of time here. He had dealings in Washington. He had a law firm in New York City, so he would only come up here, you know, occasionally, I think. But she started the Oneida County chapter of the DAR. She was the first regent in 1893, so this was her homestead, and the DAR met here.
Some of those names you mentioned, Seymour, Conkling, just amazing from Utica's history.
From Utica's history, yes.
Yeah, and some of the people that have been in this house.
Well, we know that there have been several presidents, including Ulysses Grant. Ulysses Grant, of course, was he was the president and also general, but also Roscoe Conkling was his mentor. And Roscoe Conkling was basically called the power behind the throne when Grant was president. So he had spent several times here. Garrett Smith, who was born in Utica, landed up in Peterborough, he came here as well. Many, many people.
If I recall my history correctly, and I think I do, President Grant nominated Roscoe Conkling to the Supreme Court not once but twice.
And he refused.
And he refused both times?
Yes.
Yeah. How many rooms are in this house?
You know, that's a very good question, Joe. There's probably at least a dozen or more. I know there are 4 major bedrooms, and there are probably 4 guest or servants' bedrooms in the wing that was put on in 1894. And you know, at least a half dozen more.
When the building was built, it was pre-electricity.
Yes.
So
much smaller, much smaller. The wing was put on in 1894, and that expanded to the east quite a bit. That added a lot of space.
Mm-hmm. But would they use gas and candles, Mike?
Pretty much, yes, during the time.
And for the heating would have been fireplaces?
Would have been fireplaces. There are fireplaces in every room, just about, and you know, was converted to gas, natural gas, back probably after the turn of the 19th century.
Mm-hmm.
The 20th century, I mean.
The wallpaper. I'm looking across the hall here, and I'm looking in. What is that room over there, Mike? The
salon, the major,
yeah.
Yes. That was, again, that was originally 2 identical rooms. Back in around 1929, that was, the center partition was taken out to make it into more of a ballroom. Most of the rooms here aren't huge. So if you're entertaining, if you're the Kernan family, let's say, in 1930, and you were the top of society and you're going to have some sort of parties, and I'm sure they did, you needed some place to have a major party, and so that's why they renovated that room into the salon, which is very functional for parties right now.
Mm-hmm. The way the house is laid out makes it kind of tough if you've got some physical problems, right?
Right now, that's true, and that's one of our goals, is definitely to get it handicapped accessible.
Mm-hmm. And is that something you got your 50th anniversary coming up next year, Mike?
Next year, yes.
Yeah. What's going to go into that? Have you any? I know it's early, but
we're working on a big gala for that, because I think that 50 is a big year. It's a big anniversary for us. Many thought that we wouldn't last this long, and we're certainly hoping to last at least another 50 years. So we're planning on a major celebration next year. probably a year-long celebration with a lot of our events, and also coming up with a vision, like an overall vision, not only for Landmarks, but for this property.
Mm-hmm. The property itself is really kind of, I think back to when Utica lost its old city hall.
Yes.
Was that the stimulus for Landmark to get going?
I think it was. I think that, personally, I think that losing City Hall was kind of our bellwether, almost like the preservation movement in New York City when they lost Penn Station. The preservation movement really took off, and that's what saved Grand Central Terminal and a lot of other buildings. But I think that the loss of City Hall was really the wake-up call for people. At the time, the Junior League, which is what Landmarks was formed from, the Junior League, really had some very deep concerns. I mean, that was in the throes of urban renewal. We lost a lot of downtown, and the thinking back at the time was that take the buildings down because they're old, they're past their useful life, and you'll have vacant land that someone will come and build all kinds of great skyscrapers or whatever. Well, history has shown us that that isn't always the case. It really is dependent on where you are. And I remember the land that the what is now the hotel was the Sheraton originally, and all. That took at least 10 years from the time that those buildings were taken down to actually getting a hotel standing on that property. Remember Mayor Hanna had the La Promenade idea, which didn't go anywhere, and finally under Mayor Palingo, they had the what was then the Sheraton Hotel built.
Yeah, I like that. Was trying to think of that. Was that Pearl Street? I think.
Yes.
Yeah, Pearl Street. That was a very interesting street. Sometime we'll have Frank Tomeno on again. We'll talk about Pearl Street. They had a lot of characters on that street.
Yes.
Before I forget, you've got a new website?
Yes. It's just been put up. It's uticalandmarks.org. It is fabulous. It is functional, and we are very, very proud of it. We thank our new trustee, Mark Harf, for all his hard work and dedication in getting that going. It's been a long time coming. We've had websites before, but they fall by the wayside. So now it's up and running and functional, and you can go to that for our events, our upcoming events, and to find out a little bit more about us.
And when I go home, I'm going to take a look at that website. But first, we're going to go to a break. Short one, right back. And welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. Mike Bosak's our guest, Landmark Society of Greater Utica. We're at number 3 Rutger Park, one of the most historic and iconic buildings in our area. And thanks to Landmarks, we still have it. When next do you think people will be able to come in here, Mike?
Well, we do have mansion tours and all that. We're planning something in October. I believe it's October 7th in conjunction with Preservation Week and all. So we will have mansion tours available that day. And, we do periodically. We usually have them on Father's Day weekend and all. And we will be looking at some events for next year very shortly.
And you were telling me that a couple times that work needs to be done here.
Yes.
And you can see where the work needs to be done.
Yes.
The porch needs some work, for example.
Some of that is original, so you can understand that after almost 200 years, yes, we definitely need some work.
Where's the money for that coming from?
Well, again, we are looking for donations. We're looking for volunteers as well, because we are an all-volunteer organization, and it's hard enough for an organization that says you have an executive director that's paid. But for an all-volunteer organization, it's very trying. So certainly any kind of donation, be it time, money, expertise, we're looking for all of that.
How much does it cost to join Landmarks?
It's $30, I believe, a person, and you get a lot of benefits out of that. Certainly, we're winding down our walks and talks. That's part of our mission to educate people, and we were at Sylvan Beach. We're going to be at the Ukrainian church coming up on Cottage Place very shortly, and we're going to end our season with Hotel Utica, which is now the DoubleTree Inn.
All right. Did you do anything at the Forest Hill Cemetery this year?
Not this year, no, but we are certainly planning something because we do love that cemetery, and it is certainly something that needs to be revisited on a regular basis.
Yeah, I ought to get Rand Carter up there and do a show right up there. He's the local expert, is he not?
He is certainly the expert on it.
Yeah. The shape of this building, when you think of its age, is pretty good shape.
Yes, good bones.
When Landmarks took over, what kind of shape was it in?
Well, it's funny you ask, Joe. I remember telling people for their first look at this, we called it a hard hat tour. And I remember, you remember Doug Preston.
No, very well.
Doug Preston, God bless him, shows up with a hard hat because he thought that it was in that bad a shape. And I go, well, Doug, it was a moniker that we gave to try to generate interest, but it wasn't falling down to the extent that you needed a hard hat, thankfully. And it remains that way. I mean, there is falling plaster here and there, obviously. With any building, you look what happened to Hernando County History Center. You get moisture and all that, which we are controlling in this building very well, and we do have limited heat in it during the winter months. So we are, we're good stewards. We're taking care of it. But again, there's a lot of money, the roof work that needs to be done, porch work that needs to be done.
I was going to ask you about the roof.
The roof is in very good condition, but again, it's going to be need to be replaced probably in the next 5 or so years.
Were there gardens here originally?
Yes, and just very recently we had some of the back portion of the property that was a little overgrown. We had that cut down, so little by little we're going to be reclaiming that as well. Out in the back on the south side were some pretty interesting gardens, and at some point down the road we'd love to have those recreated or something similar to that.
I know there was gardens at number 1 because I'd help myself to some tomatoes every now and then.
Yes.
The asset that you have here, do you think it's, I mean, I'm asking probably the wrong person this question, but do you think it's recognized as the asset that it really is?
Well, that's part of our mission. Again, we need to educate people as to why, and I know people that come here are very impressed. If you don't know about it, probably not. But our goal, our mission is to let everybody know about it, why it's important, why it needs to be recognized, and why we need to preserve it for perpetuity.
Yeah. What's the plan for number 1?
Number 1 is a little bit more of a challenge. I mean, we can have parties here, we can have wedding receptions here, and meetings and all that. Number 1 is a little bit more of a challenge the way it's laid out. But that being said, I think it would lend itself to like an Airbnb situation. Certainly it looks a little haunted, even though I'm told that number 3 is more haunted than number 1. But you could use that angle for those people who might be interested. So some kind of a use like that, perhaps, might be appropriate.
Did it get chopped up? I'm not sure that's the right description, but remodeled a lot when it became a nursing home?
There were certain things that happened. A lot of paint was applied to the walls. Not a lot of room chopping up, let's say. The servants' quarters and all that are less than stellar rooms. They were just basically bedrooms. But the main rooms are pretty much intact, and they're pretty spectacular.
Were there dedicated servant rooms here in number 3?
Yes, and that came about after the 1894 renovation and addition. And they were guest rooms, and then I think they were at one point servants' rooms as well.
Were there any leftovers, reminders, artifacts from some of the people that lived here?
Very little, actually, because over time I think people took things and all when they moved out. Not an awful lot per se. I mean, obviously furniture left, and over 150 or so years, the furniture is going to change. So not a lot of that. Pretty much what you see wall-wise and all that, that was what was there.
Early photographs?
We have acquired some early photographs. Yes, the Dowling family did give us some photographs of number 2 especially, and some early photographs that we do have on display.
What happened to number 2? Why did that go down?
Well, again, when the Dowlings bought it in 1952, they turned number 1 into the nursing home, which you remember.
Yeah.
Number 2 didn't really have a purpose, so my remembrance of it was as basically a frat house for Utica College. And number 3 was where they lived until about 1983, the best we can tell, when Mr. Dowling got infirm, and then he moved into number 1 along with Mrs. Dowling. So they lived there. This was primarily vacant until we took it over.
Give us that new website again, would you mind?
UticaLandmarks.org. And we're also on Facebook as well. So you can find out about our upcoming events, what we're doing, what we're planning, right on either one of those two. But the website's definitely worth checking out.
Good. Thanks for having us in.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming, Jim.
Yeah, you're welcome. That's going to do it for us this week. We'll be back next week. We'll do it all again. Speaking of websites, don't forget cnyhomepage.com. Till next time, take care of yourself, everybody.